Prime Minister, his staff, business leaders and journalists spending the night in Townsville. A second Air Force Boeing 757 has been flown to replace the problem plane and then take the delegation on to India for the visit. Acting Prime Minister Bill English is with us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a bit embarrassing the Prime Minister's stuck in Australia, isn't it?
Well, I think he'd certainly prefer to have got to India on time, but even with they cancelled the first day's events. The second day's events are really the political focus of the visit, and they should be able to get there for that.
These aborted takeoffs, though, isn't that a pretty serious situation if that's happening more than once on this particular plane?
Well, look, I'm not a technical expert. These planes have been pretty reliable, actually, for the last 7 or 8 years. And the Prime Minister uses them reasonably frequently. But it's really up to the Air Force to ensure that they are available and ready, maintained and technically proficient.
Is it an indication that perhaps the military or the Air Force needs more money?
Well, they've needed more money, but not for this particular reason. I mean, these aren't as near as old as a lot of the other planes that the Air Force has been using. But the Air Force, like the rest of the Defence Forces, is in the middle of an upgrade of quite a lot of their kit. There's a significant ongoing spend year on year over the next 10 years, long-term plan. So I'm sure if there's issues related to the actual planes, that they'll be raised by the Air Force.
What about the cost of this trip? I mean, the financial cost of sending another plane over, but also the cost of all this time that has been lost and the people who are sat parked out in the tarmac.
Well, look, I'm sure there's quite a level of frustration. There's quite a big group of 80 people. We put a lot of priority on building this relationship with India, fast-growing population, fast-growing incomes, a big part of our international education industry here. So, look, there'll be a bit of disappointment, but it's one day's been cancelled. They'll get there for the rest of the trip, and I'm sure it'll be another step forward in the relationship.
What does it do, though, for the reputation of New Zealand in this situation? I mean, what other world leader gets stuck while trying to get on an international trip?
Well, I'm sure it happens the odd time to some of them. Look, John Key has a good relationship with the Indian Prime Minister. I don't think it's going to undermine the benefits of the trip.
Talking of reputation and Fonterra that we've been talking about this morning, this repackaged milk powder that was out of date, does that risk New Zealand's reputation in the all-important China market for dairy?
Look, I don't think it'll be a significant challenge like some of the challenges they've dealt with in the past. But you can see here the Chinese authorities put a strong emphasis on quality of food, and anything related to fraud they're going to crack down on. Here, as I understand it, there's no one connected with Fonterra who's been implicated. So it's good that they're onto it, that they're dealing with the problem so it doesn't get bigger or go on for longer.
Fonterra having this internal review now to see if there's anything more they could have done. Do you see at this stage that there was anything that could have been changed that meant that they weren't in the gun in this way?
Look, I'd be surprised if they find too much significant because the last time round when they were dealing with potential contamination, which of course didn't come to anything, Fonterra went through a complete overhaul of their systems. The last episode showed where there were potential weaknesses, and I'd imagine that a review is going to find that what you can do your best to prevent crimes, but sometimes they still happen.
What about food safety regulations in China itself? Are they something that should be perhaps not strengthened up, but actually enforced better?
Well, I think you're seeing that. I mean, this is a market where there's been a history of rebranding, fraud and so on with food. You're seeing pretty decisive action here from the Chinese authorities. That in itself will, in China, continue to help build the credibility of the system.
Staying with China too, and the Hong Kong pro-democracy advocates Anson Chan and Martin Lee, did you bow to pressure by cancelling the meeting with them?
No, look, there was no discussion with Chinese ambassador or anyone like that. No discussion among ministers. Was simply advice between officers around the meeting for which I just assumed it was a straightforward economic meeting.
So that was advice that came from officials?
Yes, as we've stated last week.
So the Chinese got in touch and warned off David Shearer from the Labour Party, but they didn't get in touch with the government?
Well, they certainly weren't in touch with me.
When you say not in touch with you, in touch with anyone else from the government?
Well, look, I couldn't be definitive about who the Chinese government talked to across the whole New Zealand government. But
Seems curious though, because the 8 o'clock in the morning meeting was cancelled at what, just before 10 o'clock the night before?
Yeah, and that was, as I've said before, on advice from my office that there might be diplomatic sensitivities that I simply hadn't been aware of.
20 seconds to go, but would you be willing to meet them sometime this week? They're still in the country.
Oh, well, no one's asked, but I don't think that would be that productive right now.
Thank you very much for your time. That is Bill English, the acting Prime Minister, while John Key is away, hopefully getting to India on that trip with the business delegation.